great. I'm glad we're getting to talk and to think about it now. Oh, everybody just take a good stretch. And we know that for many of us, before we all mute, and I know we'll come back and we'll do this again, but there traditions, especially in African and African American communities, where you remember that your ancestors are with you. So everybody unmute for a second and just say the name of an ancestor. Just say a name.
Grandma
Shaprana.
Thomas Wheeler.
All right. Well, we are remembering the ancestors today, thinking about the Day of the Dead, and well, I had a tambourine. Here it is. And we're also thinking about the way, I love what you said there, Jeannie, about when people, if there are bad spirits around, then we got to work together. And when we do good things, that helps to scare them away. So here we are. All right. So go back on mute, but let's have a good time. Okay. Here we go. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Do it again. Oh, when the saints go marching in, go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in. Oh, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Oh, when we're marching hand in hand, marching for peace. Oh, when we're marching hand in hand. Oh, I want to be in that number. When we're marching hand in hand. Oh, when we sit together for justice, yes we do. Oh, when we're sitting together for justice, we are. Oh, I want to be in that number. When we sit together for justice. Now, I need some people sort of, get those hands going. Yes, indeed. Okay. Oh, when the saints go marching in, go marching in. Oh, when the saints go marching in, yeah. Oh, I want to be in that number, yeah. When the saints go marching in. One more time. Oh, when the saints go marching in, go marching in. When the saints go marching in, yeah. Oh, I want to be in that number. When the saints go marching in. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park. We're going to sing for justice, sing for peace. Remember our ancestors. And yes, we are. So welcome.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Kim. Always revivaling. I'm always feeling like I'm in a revival on our opening song. I'm here to welcome you to the church in Ocean Park. My name is Louise. I'm the minister of music here, and I'm very happy to be part of this caring interfaith congregation. We celebrate diversity, treating ourselves and others with respect. Our gatherings support, educate, and challenge us in our relationship to ourselves, to others, and the world. Embracing creative expression, singing at every opportunity, and working for social justice are all parts of our spiritual life together. You may be wondering if you are welcome. We're an interfaith community, so you're welcome if you're Jewish, if you're Muslim, if you're Hindu, if you're Buddhist, if you're Christian, if you're Wiccan, atheist, agnostic, or some combination, or something else altogether that I did not mention. You are welcome if you are an independent thinker, a doubter, a seeker, a skeptic, or mired in codependence with someone or something. You are welcome if you struggle with addiction or are recovering. You are welcome if you eat junk food or eat really well. You are welcome if you are solvent or if you're struggling to make ends meet. You're welcome if you're gay, straight, transgender, married, single, divorced, and if you're gray or getting gray. You're especially welcome if you're open-minded and curious. Welcome to the church in Ocean Park.
Morning. Thank you, Louise. I'm Reverend Janet, and I get to be the minister here at the church in Ocean Park. And I also welcome you here. This morning, we'll be honoring those who have made a difference in our lives, and there'll be a time for you to be able to share the name and something about the person who has made a difference in your life. This morning, we honor individuals and we honor whole groups of people. As you know, anti-Semitism is escalating right now to a very dangerous degree, and people are spreading hate for the Jewish people. It's traumatizing and it needs to stop. We must all call out hateful rhetoric. People's lives are at risk. This morning, poet Lynn Bronstein is here to share, and we encourage each one of you to speak out whenever you can. Allowing this kind of hateful rhetoric to stand leaves us all vulnerable. The church in Ocean Park is diverse, meaning that you might hear something that you disagree with. And if you do, just realize that your voice is just as important as whoever it is that just spoke. Let's pause for a moment for a land acknowledgement. We, the people of the church in Ocean Park, recognize that we are sitting on stolen land. In Santa Monica, where the church stands, we, the settlers of this land, honor the Kizh, the Tongva, and the Chumash peoples. We wish to be better guests upon your land, and we acknowledge the harms of genocide, enslavement, forced assimilation, gender violence, destruction of sacred sites, and the burial of historic truth about Indigenous suffering at the hands of US colonial settlerism. We apologize for the harm by pledging ourselves to work for the protection of sites and villages and the Indigenous people who live among us still. Let's take a moment of silence.
Now I want to take a moment and have you sing with me a chant from Thich Nhat Hanh to gather ourselves into this space. We will sing, I have arrived, I am home in the here and in the now 3 times. I have arrived, I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived, I am home in the here and in the now. I have arrived, I am home in the here and in the now. All right, now I'd like to do the song La Llorona. I love to sing this on Day of the Dead. It's a very, very famous song in Mexico. I like to sing it now. Yo sé que tienen las flores, Llorona, las flores del Campo Santo. No sé qué tienen las flores, Llorona, las flores del Campo Santo. Cuando las mueve el viento, Llorona, parece que están llorando. Que cuando las mueve el viento, Llorona, parece que están llorando. de ayer y hoy. Ay de mí, llorona, llorona de ayer y hoy. Ayer maravilla fui, llorona, y ahora de sombra soy. Ayer maravilla fui, llorona, y ahora mi sombra soy. Dicen que no tengo duelo, llorona, porque no ven llorar. Dice que no tengo duelo, llorona, porque no me ven llorar. Hay muertos que no hacen ruido, llorona, y es más grande su penar. Hay muertos que no hacen ruido, llorona, y es más grande su penar. Ay de mí, llorona, llorona de azul celeste. Ay de mí, llorona, llorona de azul celeste. Y aunque la vida me cueste, llorona, y no dejaré de quererte. Y aunque la vida me cueste, llorona, no dejaré de quererte.
I get the opportunity to introduce Lynn Bronstein. It probably needs no introduction to most of you because she's a member. She's been a part of our church for longer than I have. So any of you who've been around for a very long time, you may have seen her off and on throughout the years. Lynn is a veteran poet, a fiction writer, and a journalist. She has published 5 books, including Nasty Girls from Four Feathers Publishing. Her poetry and short fiction have appeared in everything from Playgirl to Chiron Review, from underground newspapers to National Public Radio. She writes the column Showbiz Cats that's seen on Facebook. Lynn has been a part of the church in Ocean Park for years. Welcome back, Lynn.
Well, thank you, Janet, and the church for having me. I have been horrified at some of the things that have happened in the last few weeks, but not surprised because I've been following for several years the unfortunate rise of anti-Semitic incidents in this country. A long time ago, back in the 80s, I wrote this poem about my family background and about the Holocaust. And magazines rejected it for years. It was an area people didn't want to go to. It finally did get published in my friend Rick Rupert's online magazine, and I published it in my book, Border Crossing. This poem is called Bones and Ashes. I am descended from a long line of rabbis. A genetic memory of the captive audience tells me I must speak, must always speak, to whatever congregation is huddled before me. In Lebanon town, great-grandfather, so they tell me, kept a school, not a cheder, but a high school for Jews of promising intellect. His name appeared as the author of books on theology. The books and school and all that told of their existence burned with the bodies of my relatives still in Lebanon after the cold invasion and the ghetto uprising. Swirling in that bitter breeze, ashes carry the intoning of my great-grandfather and of the bright youths bending an ear to lessons of the world. Through a shroud of deafness and almost 40 years, I hear them, late but heated messages from Treblinka, from Yedinek. Some say the Holocaust never occurred. Of course, the Holocaust, like many Jewish memories, is a memory of nothing, a history of nothingness, daily upon more nothingness, and to be without a past is surely to be without a future. No, This line begins again with what my dreams and memories tell me. A son escaped Lebanon and came to America to sing the liturgy on the East Side, New York, with a wife, 4 daughters, and a son who was my father. And I resumed the liturgy in a different language for a different audience, but the intent's the same. I must speak out against every image of wind-blowing ashes, of congregations silenced, of words ignored, unheard, locked up, smashed, burned, gassed, put in a desk drawer and forgotten, stamped with the disapproval of a court I never elected, cut off for lack of funds, laughed down, interrupted. All invasions of the temple I shall stare down with an implacable wrath and canine aura against the evil eye. May my poems and stories be the living echo of that lonely hiss, relic of the Polish night, the whispering of the Bronstein line to its congregation of bones.
So many are silenced, and really appreciate you not being silent. We will not be silent either. Let's take a moment and be silent, though, and listen for what speaks to us in Lynn's poem. And then Jean Gasca is going to sing a remembrance song. These do I remember well. These do I remember well. These do I remember well, through all the years. These do I remember well. These do I remember well. These do I remember well. These do I remember well, through all the years. That's by Kalir Silverman.
Greetings, everyone. Today I'm going to speak on grief as a gift. Our response to death and loss is grief. The fact that we have loss and death in the world is referred to as a state of bereavement. Our emotional and psychological response to that fact of bereavement is what is called grief. So grief is a process of reconstructing a world of meaning that has been challenged by death and loss. We grieve in different ways and in different intensities. Grief is a gift, and we express it in different ways. Some are intuitive grievers. That is, they cry, they shout, they become angry, they become emotional, even curse. They are intuitive grievers. Some are instrumental grievers. They focus on the memories of the deceased. They do memoirs, they write books, they write poetry. They go about their work as usual. They do their grief. And some are resilient mourners. They readapt and they philosophize about it, and they go about their life as usual, as if they are not grieving at all. Some people are like that. However we grieve, it can disrupt and devastate us. And so, as a gift, we do many things. From a social point of view, we may have things like music. We have the Dia de los Muertos, when we sing and we exaggerate the different images of death and so on. We sometimes, from a religious point of view, we have All Souls and All Saints Day. So we use different things to help us to cope with grief. Some readapt and philosophize about it. However we grieve, it can disrupt and devastate us. But it also leads to positive self-affirmation and psychological growth. Even in the disruption and despair, it makes us know ourselves and what we are capable of enduring and overcoming. Yes, I believe grief is a gift. And the persons who died and gifted us with their lives in many ways have left us wiser and stronger. We thank them for their contribution, however short and however small. So we think of the labors of our past mothers, fathers, wives and husbands, brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces, uncles, friends, neighbors, and even our ancestors. We face now some of the same basic challenges that they faced hundreds of years ago. The challenges are the same, but the wording, the vocabulary, the social climate may be a little different, but the challenges are just the same. For example, woke is no longer the presence of no longer the past tense of wake. Cloud is no longer what we see up in the sky. Gen Z is no longer a stimulating drink in the Caribbean. You see, and ye, now pronounced ye, Y-E, a famous biblical word, is now referred to as Kanye West. So this is the situation we live in. Yet we stand on the shoulders of others long past, and we ourselves, in time to come, others will be standing on our shoulders as well. And so as we go forward, let us continue to sing our faith, sing our trust, sing about our journey, for we are marching in the light of God. We are marching in the light of God. Many people say when persons die, they are in a better place. I believe we get this from the biblical passage in John chapter 14 that says, when Jesus said, I go to prepare a place for you. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you, and I will not leave you comfortless. I take courage in those words as a chaplain and a pastor, and I take courage in poems as well. My favorite last lines of a poem comes from the poem by Robert Frost. Facing the coldest and darkest journey he had ever faced, he says at the end of the poem, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. This is my prayer for all of us as we continue to grieve in many ways. Thank you.
We'll have another song now. We're going to see a video of Esai Barnwell a little later, but I want to sing another one of her songs right now called Breaths. And speaking of the ancestors, made me realize this was a wonderful song to sing by her. than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water. Those who have died have never, never left. The dead are not under the earth. They are in the rustling trees. They are in the groaning woods. They are in the crying grass. They are in the moaning rocks. The dead are not under the earth. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. Those who have died and never, never left. The dead have a pact with the living. They are in the woman's breast. They are in the wailing child. They are with us in our homes. They are with us in the crowd. The dead have a pact with the living. So listen more often to things than to beings. Listen more often to things than to beings. 'Tis the ancestors' breath when the fire's voice is heard. 'Tis the ancestors' breath in the voice of the water.
Now is our chance for community sharing, so it's your time. You can make a small comment or ask a question, but today is, we're honoring Dia de los Muertos. If we were in the sanctuary, some of you have been there, when we have brought our pictures and we brought our food that our ancestors appreciated, and we brought all flowers, and we brought a lot of different things, sugar coated sugar skulls, all kinds of things were on the altar, and we've made all different size altars. Francisco sometimes help us, and Brad, and we were so just imagine that in your mind. Imagine that you're bringing it forward when you come to talk, and you can talk about the person as if you're doing it in that sanctuary. And one day we will do that again. But for now, we were imagining it in our imaginations. And some churches, I mean, some Christian churches limit this to the people who have died during this year, but at the church in Ocean Park, we don't do that. So if there's somebody who has made a difference in your life, you can name them and say something briefly about them now. We know they all could use kind of pages and pages, but we'll just say something kind of brief about them now. And then possibly Dr. Kim could ring her bell at the end. Jean?
Well, this may be unconventional compared with what you just said, Janet, but I wanted to talk about a slightly different kind of grief, and that is that when you live with a very difficult person and you have hope eternal that the person will change and nourish you in some way that you need, and it sometimes happens, but not very regularly, and then the person dies, then that hope gets cut off. It gets terminated. And so there is grief about a lack of grief. There's a void. And I've struggled with this all my adult life since my parents have died, Milton and Shirley. And I would love to feel grief about their passing. And it's very difficult to not feel that. It's a real loss of.
I think she's frozen, but.
Am I Can
There
you
you
hear
go.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. But I would love to be able to feel that for myself. Thanks.
Right. Sometimes the loss is grief is almost worse than actual grief. Craig?
Yes, I would love to express this concern in reference to my father, uh, and at the same time, draw attention to the ignorance of Ye, more commonly referred to as Kanye, in that, in hoping, because my father was about understanding the pain that the Jews had come up out of Holocaust because he worked with them. But he also understood, and I think those that knew him would also condemn what is going on with the Palestinians. And I would hope that these people who suffered so much would also recognize the pain that is being subjected. Because whereas Kanye said, indeed, he was after Jews, he never said anything about the plight of those that have suffered in Israel under that regime. So hopefully we can address all of the suffering within that. I think that would be an applicable um, reference to what we're going through.
Thank you. Gail? You're on mute.
Okay, hi, can you
Hi.
hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to remember a friend of mine who passed away just like a week and a half ago. His name was Ricardo Calle-Bois. He was a parent, and this is one of his artworks. He drew these trees. He made hundreds of them, and
Wow.
he was an artist, graphic artist. He was also a parent at Play Mountain. And he was one of the first families that I enrolled when I became director. And, Ricardo was full of joy, full of enthusiasm, full of life, so supportive. So he really gave me strength, particularly in that first year when I was so, what am I doing? And I just recently, he died in Argentina, his home country, with his mom and sister there from cancer. I feel like the world has lost an incredible light with Ricardo. I also, as I always do, want to remember my mother, who died 56 years ago. Joseph, your words were just so meaningful to me. And Louise, that song, I love that song. And it really, all that connects me to her, because I don't have a whole lot of memories, concrete memories of her. But I do feel like her spirit lives within me. And her love, I carry her love. So her name is Dr. Noreen Brandt Price. Oh, thank you, everybody.
And so there's the other name again?
Ricardo.
Thank you, Ricardo. Chris.
Yeah, I'd like to remember 4 people: my mother, Julie, my father, Ed. They did attend church in Ocean Park. I'd like to remember my yoga teacher, Grani Anjali. And I'd also like to remember a colleague, Gerald Larson, professor at Santa Barbara, who passed away 3.5 years ago. And for the first time, his daughters said, yes, let's open the study let the books travel. So the books of this learned scholar and mentor are now part of the LMU community. They will be in the library so that his work will carry on.
Thank you. Can you name them one by one?
Yes, I'll put them in the chat. Julie, Ed, Anjali, Jerry.
That's a B. Thank you. And I think before we go to Craig and Linda and Lynn, we're going to go to Bonnie. Bonnie, you're on mute.
Oh, should I speak now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I want to lift up the memory of, or lift up the spirit of Rudy Teachin, who just passed a couple of days ago. And also lift up his partner, Philip. They'd been a couple for over 35 years. And Philip is saying, I can't find Rudy's records. And I think Rudy even took my records with him. Philip has humor in spite of whatever. That's one of his means of getting through his very tough life. Also, there was a lady, Louisa, who passed many years ago, but she escaped Nazi Germany. And she, as a little girl, was very feisty. Keep in mind, a girl in the 1920s and 30s, as a child, she spoke up. She went to a Catholic school that was very suppressive, you know, beating the kids on the wrists for nothing. A red-faced priest who literally, she said he throbbed at the mouth. Something was crazy. Well, she broke loose from the authority that she grabbed that priest's stick and threw it out the window. So of course, Louise had to go to the principal's office, and the principal said, don't do it again, but I don't blame you. Louisa, as a little girl, had a brother who apparently was small-bodied and kind of sickly, and some boys were beating up on him. She, as a 7-year-old, went and jumped the boys and beat up on them and rescued her brother. And this is, again, mind you, in the early 1900s, very feisty, very daring, very bold for a girl. Fast forward in time, I knew Louisa as a senior citizen, and she had a gift of just knowing. She was tuned into a lot of levels, spiritually, intellectually. She knew a lot, and she didn't have to be told. She knew what was coming down in the future. She didn't have to listen to KPFK to be aware of what the BS that was going on politically. She just knew, and she had the brightest light in her eyes. It was just phenomenal. So,
can you say their names again, Bonnie, one at a time? Say the names again.
Rudy, R-U-D-Y, and then Louisa. And if I may share one more, a longtime friend, her name was Gail, G-A-Y-L-E, who passed some years back, but we've been friends since being teenagers.
Gail. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Craig or Claudia?
It's me, Craig.
Hi, Craig.
Usually, you know, I've spoken about my mother, but today I want to remember my father, who passed away at actually a fairly young age, and maybe a reason to remember it is I am now older than he was when he passed away, so I don't feel all that old. And Claudia and I had been married only a couple of years. She was in fact still in medical school when he passed away. And I think I haven't thought about it in a long time, other than our two boys didn't have a grandfather to go with my mom, but that it did kind of change the course, I guess, in some ways of our life, because my parents as a couple kind of balanced each other out in a way that we lost when my dad passed away. So, and he was a very talented piano player as well as a high school teacher and counselor. So, and his given name is Gerald, but he went by Gary Hamilton.
By Gary?
Thank you, Gary.
Gary. Thank you. Linda?
Thank you. This summer, the world lost Epifanio Camacho, someone who was written out of history, but was one of the leaders of the United Farm Workers. He was the picket captain in the historic strike of farm workers in 1965 in Delano. And actually was the one that pushed Chavez to organize the first strike in the area when he was the strike at Mount Arbor Rose Nursery in May of 1965, and Epifanio Camacho has been written out of most of the histories of the United Farm Workers. But it's a very personal loss to me. He was my friend and comrade for almost 50 years. And he lived a long and important life, and I want him to be remembered.
Okay.
His name was Epifanio.
Epifanio. Thank you. Lynn?
Well, over the last 10 years, I have seen a lot of people I know, particularly in the poetry community, friends of mine who have been leaving this plane. And there are so many of them that it would be hard to list all of them, but there were two this year that affected me. One of them, I think her name has been mentioned earlier, maybe before the program started, was my good friend Marissa Rubin, who left us at the end of July after enduring stage 4 pancreatic cancer. When her husband Jerry called me early in July to tell me about that she was in Santa Monica UCLA Medical Center in palliative care, he was crying and I was crying, and it was only over a phone call, and I wished I could have reached out to him in person to hug him. And I tried during the next month to reach out as much as I could. I left a phone message for Marissa. I was heartbroken, but we had to give her up to what was destined to be. And so I do now call upon her name, and I'm trying to continue to feel her presence and her example. And then more recently, early in September, our poetry community lost Linda Albertano, who was a poet and performance artist and an inspiration and a teacher, and someone who once gave me comfort after we were in a poetry slam. And these were both really, really serious losses. So everybody is the loss. At any rate, Marissa Rubin and Linda Albertano, I want to lift up their spirits.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you, Lynn. Louise?
Yes, I want to lift up the memory of a man named Chip, and I don't remember his last name, but he was a Santa Monica resident, and he was murdered by Dora, his girlfriend, and he made a big impression on me because he sang at a party with such confidence and fun and joy that I really, really missed him after he died. And I also want to lift up, since we're talking about anti-Semitism and in the Holocaust. And my father was Jewish, and my brother's birth father was also Jewish. And I want to lift up all of those ancestors that did not get killed in the Holocaust. They died of other causes, which I don't know, but I want to lift them up. They did not get experience suffering by the Nazis. Thank you.
Joanne?
Yeah, whenever it comes to remembering people who have influenced my life a lot, the first two, of course, are my parents, my mother and my father, and they both, provided a very loving and secure home and a good childhood that I think got me off to a pretty good start. And then, of course, I always have all these pictures around me a lot. This is my husband, Sandy, who was not only the love of my life, but, my life partner for almost 27 years. And one of the things, he brought me many good things and still does. But one of the things he brought me was became a very close friend, and that was Rita Lowenthal. I wouldn't have met her except for Sandy meeting her, and then Rita and Jerry came into our lives, couple to couple. And Rita's curiosity and love of life was very strong, and I enjoyed so much of her friendship. But I also have a legacy from her that is helpful to me, and that is the Y warm water pool. She's the one. I wouldn't even be going to the Y and exercising as much as I do, except that Rita have insisted we try out the warm water pool exercise classes. So these people have been very important in my life, and I thank them very much for all that I received from them and still do.
Can you name them one by one?
Esther, Wilsey, Sandy, and Rita.
Thank you. Chuck.
I have been a part of the church for a long time, and I remember those people in the church who have passed, who have died. The first one was Rose Fine. She's an old communist way back. Her brother was actually, head of the Communist Party in the U.S. And when we had her service at the church, the FBI showed up very conspicuously in their suits, tight black colors, and suit coats and white shirts. Rose was inspiring to me, but of course Eleanor, who was also inspirational. I don't know that Jim Kahn could have put together the church as well as he did without Eleanor Graham. Dr. Bill Butcher and Ida were my dear friends, especially Dr. Bill. There's probably others, but those from the church, also my father, George Howell, and my mother, Lona Helen Howell.
Okay, you want to say that? So there's Rose, Eleanor, Dr. Bill, Ida. You want to name anybody else, Chuck?
I'm sorry?
Was that it? Yeah.
My mother and father, George Howell and Lona Helen Cordell.
And thank you. Dr. Kim.
Yes, I'm remembering my friend Stephanie Sloan. And I always remember her around this time of year because a lot of times I would spend Thanksgiving with her.
Mm.
And I'm thinking of people that always, when we start coming toward the holidays, they begin to remember and to grieve even in a different kind of way. And this is Stephanie and I. We are at the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival. And she would always go there and work in the first aid tent and help many people out with what they needed. This is in upstate. It started, in upstate New York, the Falcon Ridge Folk Festival. So there we are. But yes, I definitely miss Stephanie. And there she is.
Oh,
So Stephanie Sloan.
Stephanie Sloan. I'd like to add a couple to the church list. I know there's very many more, but Franci, amazing poet Franci, who is a big part of our church. And recently, Marissa Rubin. We lift up Marissa Rubin and Jerry Rubin's loving wife. And I would just like to end by lifting up my dad, of course. My father is such a big part of who I am. If it weren't for him, I wouldn't be who I am, of course. I mean, that's just how it is with everybody's father. But my father was humble, but he was also hilarious. And he was a piano player and a photographer, but he was also very courageous. And he was an activist, but nobody knew it because he didn't broadcast it. He just did it. He took me to my first peace organizing event, and I didn't even know what it was. Everybody else was my age except for him, and he was very well accepted. So I lift him up, and I lift all of those up that you've all spoken. And I know there's many, many more that we could go on and on about this, which if we can all take all of those in and realize how important and what a part of our lives all of them are, and to realize that we're doing that for others at this time right now. We're also being that and more for other people. We don't know. So as we go through our life, it's important how we walk through the world, and because we are affecting people's lives one way or the other, we can't help it. So thank you all for sharing.
Yes. Remembering all of those people and names that have not been named, and those who don't have anyone to remember them right now. Remembering. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. This is another one from the incredible Issei Barnwell, and she's joined by many members of the Unitarian Church from all around the country that had gathered to sing.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. Oh, for each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth, keepers of faith, makers of peace, and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage, fathers of time, daughters of dust, and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy, brothers of love, lovers of life, and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers. We are our grandfather's dreamings, and we are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are one.
Wow, that was so fabulous. How about a stretch? Okay, I want to share our announcements with you.